Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Transit Tangents. We are literally in transit, if you can't tell. My name is Lewis.
I'm Chris. We are in the Transit Tangents Mobile Command Center, aka Chris's Mini Cooper.
We're actually on our way right now from Austin to New Orleans. We've got a fun episode coming up from New Orleans. It'll probably be a week or maybe 2 weeks after what we're recording right now. But we thought it could be a really interesting opportunity to make an episode on our trip over to kind of talk about a couple transit-related projects that are happening along the way between Austin and New Orleans.
Yeah, it's a good callback to our episode about the squeaky wheels and really look at the infrastructure bill and see how much money is actually being invested in these communities between Austin and New Orleans. And we have 7.5 hours of communities to go through. So.
Yeah. Plenty to go through. Definitely.
We started at Road Trip Off Right. We got a snack. We got our iced coffee. We hit up our Buc-ee's.
Buc-ee's, yep. You can't have a road trip in Texas without a little bit of Buc-ee's. It was actually the smallest Buc-ee's I've ever seen.
It was a baby Buc-ee's.
Yes, yeah. Like only 4 gas pumps, I think. Weird. Maybe 6.
It might have been 10. But still,
10, okay. Yeah.
It was pretty small.
For Buc-ee's, I mean, it's
For anybody who has never seen a Buc-ee's, we're talking about gas stations that have 100 to 200 pumps.
Yes.
It has become an internet meme. It's basically like road trip Disneyland. It's kind of great.
Yeah. But anyway, Chris did the duty of kind of pulling some of these projects together. I guess, do you want to set up what are these projects all being funded by? Kind of how did you pick these projects? And we'll jump right into them in a second.
Yeah, like I said, we're kind of doing a callback to the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed several years ago. And we talked a lot about what that money was going toward. So when I pulled up the data for this region, I basically took out everything that wasn't part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we took out everything that was like EPA and the energy sector. So we're just looking at DOT projects that have been awarded in some of the communities that we're passing through. This is by no means a comprehensive list. This is just some of the things that we thought were interesting along the way.
Totally, and we're going to start off where we started our road trip in Austin, where we're from, and there's kind of 2 fun projects being funded in this happening in Austin. They are Project Connect, which, if you're from the Austin area, is a project that is going to hopefully bring light rail to Austin finally.
And Project Connect is a maybe project. We're in the process of filing for the funds. Project Connect is about $7 billion. And we're hoping that the federal government will cover about half.
Right. And for those of you not from Austin, Project Connect is going to include kind of a light rail line that's going to right now be a little less than 10 miles in length. It was supposed to be significantly longer than that, but lots of cost overrun kind of things, dealing with inflation and all of these sorts of things going on, lawsuits. So it is not to the extent that we necessarily we're hoping for. However, in my opinion, you've got to start somewhere. It's going to be easier to get extensions and whatnot down the line, but you have to start somewhere or else it's never going to happen. We do currently have one actual commuter train line that exists, the Red Line. Yeah. There's still a lot more potential with that line, but the light rail as existing, the plan is going to be a little bit scaled back, but excited for what could happen with it down the line. But yeah, I mean, that's a big one where you like to see federal money being spent on things like that, just because localities, as we're seeing, have such a hard time trying to pay for a project of that magnitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the infrastructure bill really comes in handy, is helping the communities bridge these gaps, because that's the whole point of it, is no matter what side of the political aisle you fall on, it is the opportunity to invest in America. So there's a lot of just really awesome projects, Project Connect being a good one.
Totally. The other project happening in Austin is the expansion of the airport. The Austin airport, actually kind of a fun story for the airport in general. The old Austin airport used to be in an area that is now a neighborhood known as Mueller. And that airport was long before my time in Austin, but was very small in comparison. It was the early 2000s, they made the switch over to the existing airport in Austin, which used to be an Air Force base. So they added major capacity when they built that airport. But if you know anything about Austin, it's a very fast-growing city, lots of events going on.
Faster than they could have planned for.
Yes, and it is not uncommon, especially during huge events in the city where, the TSA lines literally go outside of the building,
Which there was some experience of this weekend. This was Eclipse weekend.
Yes, and there were, it's like lines literally out of the building quite a ways. Lots of people missed flights. So, there's all sorts of issues going on with the size of the airport right now. A lot of waiting on the tarmac when you land because there are no open gates. So the current proposed projects at the airport include basically adding an entire new terminal, which would require tunneling underneath a stretch of tarmac, and then building, basically doubling the size of the airport at full build-out. Which is massively needed at this point in time. The current bill actually would add, let me see here, I want to pull up the specific number. So the total number is $39 million coming from the feds for this. That project is going to cost more than $39 million, no doubt. It's going to take some time as well. It's going to be done out in phases. But that's another one. You like to see the federal funds being spent there, and it'll be
desperately needed in Austin. From what I read, the airport reached its design capacity 20 years early, which is just crazy. It was originally around, I think, 11 million passengers per year was the expectation. And then they made some changes to get up to about 15 million passengers a year. But we're currently servicing, on average, 21 million passengers a year.
Wow.
Absolutely insane.
Wow. It would be very interesting to see how many of those passengers are flying first to either Dallas or Houston.
Yeah.
I would say it's a good chunk, and you could probably make the argument that with some high-speed rail we could, and even some commuter rail, honestly, to some of those places, like, you could probably cut some of that down. But
if we had a great high-speed rail, we wouldn't be taking a road trip to New Orleans. This would be a very different podcast episode.
Yeah, I did look into taking the train to New Orleans, and it was going to take me like 12 or 13 hours or something.
18.
Like that. 18, okay.
Yeah.
Terrible. I mean, it's already going to be an 8-hour car ride, so yeah.
Hey Gondola Gang, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We're going to jump right back in just a second. But first, if you like what you're hearing, we just want to make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button.
Like the video if you haven't done so already. And we also love reading your comments, so please leave a comment. If you're listening, please consider giving us a rating, preferably 5 stars. I hope you think we deserve it, but I'll let you be the judge of that.
I'll take forward the comment.
So those are 2 projects happening in Austin that are under this bill. Let's take a look at the next town on the list. So those next towns are Giddings, and Brenham.
I'm assuming that's how a Texan says it. Giddings and Brenham. Giddings and Brenham are next on the list. Giddings, a very cute little town. It used to be a big railroad town, actually. They still have their passenger depot right in the middle. It's very cute. And then Brenham, famous for Bluebell ice cream.
I did not know that.
Yeah, home of Bluebell.
There we go. And both of those are getting aviation grants as well. It looks like it's for spending some money on kind of like local airports, basically. So not an airport you're going to have a flight necessarily coming in and out of with a commercial airliner, but small, local, municipal, town airports and whatnot.
Yeah, still important services to have, especially for smaller communities.
Totally. And the funding for those was somewhere in the realm of a couple $100,000 each, so we're not even cracking $1 million on those. So the next stop on the journey here is Houston. Couple projects in Houston. One of them that we already talked a little bit about. Houston is also getting money for airport improvements. There are also, though, more notable that we haven't talked about yet, some grants for, number 1, reconnecting communities, and number 2, for, losing the sunglasses over there, reconnecting communities, and also for Safe Streets programs. So we'll start with Safe Streets. I know I said them out of order. In general, this legislation had $5 billion up for grabs on Safe Streets projects.
If you want to learn more about Safe Street type projects, you can go back to our previous episode, which is all about road diets.
Yeah. It'll be a couple weeks back, but that's we'll put one of those little things in the corner if you want to watch the road diets episode. It's right there, and if it's not right there, it's over there. I don't know. It's one of those. I don't know. But yes. Safe Streets programs, though, can be anything from improving sidewalks, improving bike lanes, what else? I don't know.
Yeah, fixing adding a turning lane in the middle, making it more pedestrian friendly.
Yeah, totally. And again, we get into a lot of that in the road diets episode. We're currently not practicing our road diet habits right now, eating beef jerky and stuff at the moment, but we'll have to see if we choose Subway or Raising Cane's. We'll see. Stick around if you want to see. It'll be included in a bit, but so good to see Houston of all places getting some safe street stuff. I don't want to pretend to know all of what's happening in Houston right now, but I know their new mayor has actually been doing quite a bit of work against some of the safe streets measures that have been put in place, which is frustrating to see from afar, at least.
I realize it was a mistake to eat the beef jerky as we're supposed to be talking.
Yes, yeah. You're blowing it over there. I'll keep covering for you here. No, yeah. So I know the new mayor in Houston has at least from the outside looking in, been less of a fan of some of the traffic calming measures, some of the safe street stuff. So we'll see how this money gets spent. Of the $5 billion federally, so at the national level, only about 1.9, I believe, billion has been spent. So there's still a lot of money up for grabs there that cities, towns, transit agencies, and so many other folks can essentially go and apply for some of that money. So that's pretty cool. Do you want to talk a little bit about the reconnecting community stuff? We don't have a specific project in Houston necessarily to talk about, but Houston is getting some of this money.
Yeah, I think the reconnecting communities is a really important one. This is something that's been a big focus for the U.S. DOT, especially under our good friend Pete Buttigieg, our one-day good friend Pete Buttigieg. It's been a big focus of theirs, and this is really about repairing communities from previous transit and transportation design mistakes. And you see a lot of this when you look at Instagram accounts like Segregation by Design. They're really good about showing how the Federal Highway Program really destroyed some communities and really dissected these communities in half. The money really goes to reconnecting these communities and bridging those gaps and making our cities healthy again.
Yeah, totally. One qualm I want to point out, I guess, that I do have with the reconnecting communities money is that some of it is literally like we'll tie it into the Austin example again, just like with the 35 expansion. While the caps would be better than the existing, probably, you're still crossing like 6 lanes of traffic in the middle of the city, and for a reconnecting communities grant to be able to be towards literally adding more lanes to a highway feels a little icky to me, if I'm being honest. But
there's that famous Lewis optimism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm the Biden administration and I'm supposedly like super climate change weary and all this sort of stuff, to literally see some of this money going towards a highway expansion, it just feels icky to me. I don't know. People might disagree with me. I don't know.
Let us know in the comments.
Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, I think the idea of having this money available for, especially in instances where we can do what has been done where I grew up in Rochester, New York, where we're literally like removing a highway and actually reconnecting a community with a nice boulevard that has bike lanes and sidewalks and trees and new apartments and all that sort of stuff. That feels like reconnecting downtown Rochester to the neighbors that were on the other side. And to me, projects like the 35 expansion leave a little bit to be desired.
Just bury it and forget about it. That's worked in the past. Just bury it and forget about it.
Bury it and forget about it. Yep.
Talk to the EPA.
So those are a few examples of types of projects that are happening in Houston. I know some of the reconnecting communities grants in Houston aren't necessarily going towards like capping highways or anything, but they're actually being used in a couple neighborhoods that it sounds like had some big stroads with bad sidewalks, lack of tree cover, which in the summer in Houston is a huge deal actually, and trying to make some improvements like kind of on the margins in smaller areas to make it easier to navigate throughout your own community even.
Yeah, because a lot of times when we talk about reconnecting communities, we think about like this big 4-lane, 5-lane highway came in and just decimated the communities. We don't often think about how we turned fairly quiet neighborhood streets into 4-lane stroads.
Right.
And really just destroyed the character of those neighborhoods. So I think this goes a long way to helping restore that character and making it a nice place to live in.
Totally.
All right, Lewis.
We're at Raising Cane's.
Raising Cane's?
My first Raising Cane's experience.
Your first time? Gonna get your chicken tendy fix?
I do love my tendies. I've never had these tendies before though, so we'll see.
The dog over there, that's actually Cane.
Is it?
I think it's Raising Cane, like the third.
Wow. Very excited.
Just eat this molten chicken tender.
Yeah, I'm gonna burn myself.
What are your thoughts right now with your mouth full? All right, moving on from Houston, hometown of Beyonce, and our swampy little neighbor to the south, swampy big neighbor to the south. We continue down I-10, going west towards Louisiana. For anybody who has driven this stretch of Texas, it is not the most exciting. However, there are some exciting projects along the way when we look at cities like Baytown, Winnie, and Beaumont. These are three cities that we are going to pass on our way to New Orleans. In Baytown, we are looking at what type of improvement?
In Baytown, we have safe streets happening, so not a huge amount of money. It looked like $400,000 or so going towards safe streets program. So again, that's sidewalks, bike lanes, traffic calming, all of that sort of stuff.
Is great for Baytown because I think of Baytown as being a very industrial city. Anybody who's driven through it knows like it's a lot of wide roads for like semi trucks. So any type of traffic calming measure or something that's going to be better for the average driver, love to see that.
Right. And then the next one was Winnie, right?
Yeah, Winnie. I think we just fell back into airport improvements again, which is one that we're going to see really all over the place. A lot of money is going toward airport and infrastructure improvements, which again, good.
Right.
And then we get on to Beaumont and Port Arthur, where we see more airport improvements, but we also see some federal transit money being spent on better buses.
Right, and a lot of this bus transit spending is on what's being called like low or no emission buses. We're starting to see that in a lot of other cities now. A lot of buses are actually electric, which might sound a little funny at first, but like as somebody who is biking a lot and walking a lot, navigating around the electric buses is so much more pleasant than maybe that's not a surprise, I guess. It's so much more pleasant though than the big diesel engine.
You're not getting
buses
blasted with like fumes as you go by.
Yeah, and they're quiet, and seemingly the batteries last a very, they last long enough to make it happen. I was curious about that. I'd be curious to actually look in to get the actual statistic of how long they do last. But
I just had this core memory, and maybe you have it, maybe some of our listeners or viewers would have it, of a science textbook when I was a kid. And one of the pictures, when it was talking about like car emissions and carbon dioxide, it showed a tree next to a bus stop. And the tree next to the bus stop had completely died because of all of the fumes. And the trees around the bus stop were still green. Does this ring any bells?
I have no idea what no.
Okay, just if you saw it in your textbook as a kid, that image stuck with me. So whoever designed it, good job. But yeah, that comes to mind when I think of green buses.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, that feels like an easy win also, especially as like the battery technology keeps getting better. In the long run, you probably have cost savings on gas and fuel and that sort of stuff. In the short run, I mean, I'm sure the battery tech is a little expensive at the moment, but having federal money going towards it and more transit agencies ordering them is only going to help improve that technology, which is going to be super important moving forward. On that same vein of electric buses, we neglected to mention electric cars at this point, and there is some money being set aside for electric car charging.
Yep. And we're going off on a little bit of a tangent, if you will.
Transit tangent.
Exactly. The transit tangent. Well, we're also talking about transportation in general. We're on this road trip. And electric vehicles, while still aren't great for cities when we talk about cars congesting roadways, it's still very important that we are building a future for them. And so part of the infrastructure bill is actually going to improving the charging network across the country. And many of the cities that we're going to pass through on our way to New Orleans are all getting money to help improve that charging network.
Totally. And I think that's important too, because right now, unless you have a Tesla, road trips are very difficult for you. And like Tesla's like way ahead of the game, frankly.
Rivian just announced they're shipping all of their vehicle owners adapters for Tesla superchargers.
Right. Case in point. There you go. All right. So next up on the journey is Lake Charles. something fairly interesting in Lake Charles?
Yeah, Lake Charles, not a huge town, but one that I pass through very frequently when I go to Mobile. If anyone...
For context, Mobile is where Chris is from, if you don't know that.
Yes. It is, for anybody who has driven through Lake Charles, you are very familiar with the Calcasieu Bridge. Maybe not by the name, but you have definitely been over it. It is a narrow bridge on Interstate 10 that is absolutely terrifying. In fact, it frequently makes the list of most terrifying bridges in America. As you're on it, we actually mentioned this in the infrastructure episode before and had a video of it. When you're driving across it, you're just thinking like one more hurricane and this thing is gone. Well, good news for everybody in Lake Charles and all of the people who travel through. This bridge is finally being replaced, and they are getting a huge influx of federal cash to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, for the full context, the bridge, we just looked it up, was built in 1952.
1952 or
1951 or 52, which makes it basically like a nearly 75-year-old bridge.
Yeah, and originally it was part of U.S. Highway 90, which, fun fact, is the highway I grew up on.
Wow.
Yeah, my neighborhood was on that highway.
And we're going to get to drive over this bridge, in a couple hours. Yeah.
Yeah, we're headed there. A few hours and we'll be there.
Wow. I'm going to be ready when I was a little kid, I used to actually going over bridges. I would have my hand on the window so that I could lower my car window so that I used to be, still am not a great swimmer. And I was like, the idea of being trapped in a car in the water freaked me out.
I thought you were going to say that you held your breath when you went over the bridge, but that's a tunnel. You hold your breath in a tunnel.
Yes. Hold your breath in a tunnel. Going over the bridge, I would have one hand on my seatbelt ready to take it off and the other on the window. You can ask my mom. No one knows my mom, but get Nancy on the phone. No. Yeah, I used to do that going over. There's a bridge in Rochester that went over the Irondequoit Bay Bridge, not 75-year-old bridge. And I used to do it, going over that all the time. Total money being spent on that bridge right now under this legislation is
up to about $325 million.
Yeah, so sizable chunk of change.
Now, granted, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar bridge,
right?
But it helps.
Yeah, no, totally. And you don't have to drive over a bridge that is older than my grandparents. So
there we go.
Yeah.
Wow, you have really young grandparents.
Well. Oh, never mind. It's not older than my grandparents.
My grandmother's 93.
Yeah, no, my grandparents are in their late 80s. That was, yeah. I will say it is fairly late. I'm running on low sleep from this week. My voice is a little hoarse. I've been working hard the last couple days, so math, not my strong suit under these conditions. And then, after Lake Charles, we have one that is kind of fun for me to see here because I've actually been able to use this ferry.
Yeah. To be completely transparent, this is in Cameron. Thank you. This is in Cameron, Louisiana, which is not exactly on the road trip, but I thought this was really interesting. If you go due south of Lake Charles, where there's sort of a canal that connects the lake to the Gulf, that is where you find Cameron, Louisiana. And you've been there.
And I've been there. In 2016, after graduating from college, a friend and I bought a half-size school bus, a used half-size school bus.
Magic school bus. Yes,
my magic school bus. And I lived in it for 6 months, driving across the U.S. with my friend, rock climbing, mountain biking, a little bit of backcountry skiing, and we stayed in an awesome spot camping on the beach on the Louisiana coast. And we were then headed into Texas, and it was my first time actually ever in Austin, long before I lived there. And we took this ferry while driving along the coastline in Louisiana and put our bus on there for the whopping price of $1. $1 to take our bus on the ferry, which was pretty awesome. Something tells me it might not be $1 anymore today. I don't know.
Yeah, probably not. But with the federal infrastructure bill, they are getting $25 million. And that $25 million is going to the building of 2 brand new ferries to serve the 2 communities on either side of the waterway. So, continuing west through Louisiana, we will pass through a couple of cities, Giddings and Lafayette, and then we end up at Baton Rouge. And on a similar theme of scary bridges, you have the, what I was hoping was going to be on the list was replacing the Mississippi River Bridge. Unfortunately, it is not on the list. But what is on the list for Baton Rouge is some airport improvements, which we won't really get into the details of that.
Yeah, and then last but certainly not least is our final destination, which we are still a long way
Don't say it that
from
way while we're driving.
arriving at, what?
Don't say final destination while we're driving. It's like
Oh, God, final, I
a
was,
movie.
all this, there's going to be like, oh, God, there's a truck with a bunch of rebar up there. There's going to be a piece of rebar coming right through the windshield. Wow, I was like, why are you saying don't say final destination? So last but not least, the last stop on the journey is the Big Easy, New Orleans. And New Orleans is getting money for all sorts of these different programs. One of their more notable projects is they're getting money for their new kind of transit center. Maybe tomorrow, while we are out riding around on transit in New Orleans for the episode that's coming after this, so if you're not subscribed, get down there, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching, if you're listening, set up for auto downloads, that sort of stuff, so you can make sure you hear it. But we'll try to keep an eye out for where that transit center may be going. But they've also got money for some of the Safe Streets programs, transit grants, all of that sort of stuff.
Improved buses. Also helping improve their ferry service, which will also hopefully get a chance to ride the Algiers ferry.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to do a very interesting episode on ferries at some point. So stay tuned for that. If you have any ferries you want us to talk about.
I'm really excited for New Orleans. This is getting very close to my old backyard where I grew up. I used to spend a lot of time going there, so I'm very excited to take Lewis and all of you on a journey to experience the streetcars there.
So the New Orleans Transit Hub, the amount of money being spent on that is actually $24.8 million, and it's going to go towards better connections between different modes of transit, more like shelters, bus shelters, that sort of stuff, so that you're not, waiting in the sun or in the rain, that sort of stuff for your different modes of transportation.
Also, anybody's been to or lived in New Orleans, it rains all the time.
Yes.
And the majority of their infrastructure money is going to be spent on pumping water out of the city. So
Yes.
It's good to see some transit-oriented development, too.
Yeah, and ahead of this trip, I mean, they are pumping water, or they're getting water out of there right now. They got a lot of rain, some flooding, buses were canceled, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit more on the New Orleans one. So overall, I mean, on the 4 projects we talked about before, Project Connect getting $3.5 billion. We had the Austin Airport getting somewhere in the realm of, let's see here, the terminal program getting almost $40 million. You've got the Calcasieu Bridge, Calcasieu Bridge getting $325 million. You got Cameron Ferry getting an extra $25 million, and then the New Orleans Downtown Transit Hub also getting about $25 million. Obviously, a lot of these are a drop in the bucket compared to what is being spent on a national level. Project Connect's on the higher end of that. Obviously, the $3.5 billion is not a small amount of money.
Well, and I have to say, excluding Project Connect, because that's not a done deal yet, when I pulled the data for this, and I narrowed this down to just DOT projects. So keep in mind, just DOT. We've excluded the EPA. We have excluded the Department of Energy. We're just looking at the Department of Transportation. It's roughly $500 million of investment just on the roadway between Austin and New Orleans.
Right.
That is a huge investment in the community.
Yeah.
Or communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, while we are not able to stop and look at all of these specific projects, we figured while we're doing this, a good excuse to kind of look into seeing what some of these projects are actually doing in some of the smaller communities across the country. And you can kind of go ahead and take a look at what projects, big or small, might be happening near you. We'll try to put the link to what you kind of pulled all this from in the description so that you can go ahead and look on your own to see what projects might be happening in your community. I don't know why I said that so weird.
If you know a project in your community that you want us to talk about, make sure to put it in the comments. If you work for the DOT, send this to our good buddy Pete Buttigieg, and maybe he can join us on one of our trips.
Totally. And some of these ones that we even mentioned, like we hope to do standalone episodes on, I think trying to get somebody in Austin to talk about the airport expansion would be really cool. See if we can go in and chat with somebody who's making some decisions on that. All sorts of these different things would be fun episodes on their own. So yeah, if one of them stands out to you, definitely let us know. Thank you all so much for watching this episode. We've been having a lot of fun doing this still, and we're excited for what else we're going to be able to work on. That's why we're taking the time to drive 8 hours out to New Orleans. We were able to make it happen because Chris was already going to be on his way out to Mobile to go visit with some family. And I actually had been due to visit with some family soon, so I'm headed up to Rochester, New York from New Orleans. So flying out of New Orleans instead of Austin. Chris doing his thing in Mobile and coming back. But yeah, we've enjoyed doing this so far. Excited to do a whole lot more. If you haven't left a comment or anything like that, we definitely want to hear from you. We read all the comments. Please consider doing so. If you're on a podcast platform that doesn't have comments, you can also email us or contact us. The link for that is on our website, transittangents.com. Yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Transit
Tangents
Tuesday.
was really good for not being planned.
Yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit's where it's at. Watch me go.